phone recording, let me know. Okay,
Okay, we are now recording.
okay. Welcome, everybody. We're at the December 10th general meeting of the Greater Pine Island Civic Association. Uh, Tonight, we have a present.
Oh, sorry, Scott. It ended up muting you. So could you just unmute and start over again? Thank you very much. Sorry about
It's
that,
like I'm
guys.
making a commercial here, all right?
Yeah.
Okay, tonight we have a presentation by Cindy Bear, co-director of the Randell Research Center. We also have a public hearing by Kari McPherson, who's looking for a change in the setback required for his house so he can have a swimming pool. We're also going to have an update on water quality issues at Tropical Point Beach, an update on the Wink News Doppler radar tower, and then some public comments. So I'd like to turn this over to Helen Fox to introduce our first guest, Cindy Bear.
Okay. Well, Cindy Bear is the co-director of the Randell Research Center here at Pineland on Pine Island. And she's been directing that center for the last 10 years. She first visited the Randell Research Center and met the archaeologists from the University of Florida back in the 1980s, when the archaeology of that site was just beginning to take off. It was a very exciting time. She's also been the liaison between the school district, the Lee County, I guess, school district, and the Randell Research Center, and they host many children's classes all over that site, and it's a wonderful thing to see. So I'm now going to ask Cindy to unmute, and I'll spotlight her and let her continue her introduction of herself.
Okay, thank you. It is nice to be here. It is nice to see everybody. And I'm going to pretty quickly go ahead and share my screen and bring up my PowerPoint for you. There we go. And from the beginning. Oh, no, let's go back one. All right. So before I really start into the heart of tonight's program, I will tell you a little bit more about myself and a little bit about the Randell Research Center. So I am a fifth generation Floridian and quite proud of that fact, I have to say. I did work with Lee County Schools for about 20 years as a resource teacher, working with teachers and students, getting them outdoors and into the environment. And I also worked for a while with Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and I actually, in the midst of all that, helped co-found a local kayak eco tour business. So I've been around the waters of this area for quite a long time, and I'm particularly, though, enriched by my last 10 years of work with the Randell Research Center. Some of you might know the Calusa Heritage Trail that we do operate at Pineland, where we protect about 70 acres at the heart of what was the second largest town of the Calusa people. We also manage the Pineland Post Office, and our office and lab building is right next door in the Ruby Gill House. And we have a variety of work going on behind the scenes in research for our local regional archaeology and in history and ecology. Tonight, though, I am going to focus on a particular set of work that started, well, a bit back in time now. Some of you are familiar with our Randell Research Center, and I thought you'd be interested to know about the work going on Calusa Island. So, as I mentioned, I'm a paddler and a boater, and let me see if my slide will advance here. There we go. And so, like perhaps many of you, these maps of the area and this chart of the area are really kind of quite familiar to me. I've used them a lot. I've applied my way through these waters quite a bit. It's like a home territory. But I definitely have learned also through the years how dynamic this region is, and the shifting shoals and changes with storms and through time. And I've become quite an awe and appreciative of the place as well. So you see in the map on the left where Calusa Island is circled. It's just at the north end of Pine Island. There is no bridge to it. You notice it's right around the corner there, so to speak, from Burgess Island and Patricio and Mondongo. We're all protected a bit by Costa there to our west. And then you can also see on this map where Pineland is located, as well as some of the other important areas in Pine Island Sound, Jocelyn Island, Usepa, Cabbage Key, places that are probably quite familiar to some of you if you do much paddling or boating around and fishing around this area. And I do expect that some of you have actually visited Calusa Island. You could give me a thumbs up, actually, if you have. I can see some of you. Or there's a little reaction button too, if you know how to use that with Zoom. All right, so some of you I see have, many of you really have not, but I bet you've been near it, because if you've taken the Tropic Star out to Cal Costa when they were located at the Jug Creek Marina, or pulled in there for gas or to get ice there on Portobello, and then you headed out that pass to the north where that yellow arrow is, that was Calusa Island there to your right. It is about 60 acres in size. Most of it is owned by our local Calusa Land Trust, an all volunteer organization that's dedicated to purchasing and protecting sensitive environmentally and archaeologically sensitive lands. And maybe you've been lucky enough, if you've gotten out there, to even meet with Ed Chapin, local icon, hero here on Pine Island. Maybe met him at the dock and taken a tour of the site. If you haven't, hopefully you'll get to do that at some point in time, as people who are concerned and care about Pine Island. And if you did step ashore, hopefully perhaps you recognize that the high ground you were walking on was the result of centuries and centuries worth of accumulations of material from people of the past, formed into what we call middens. I realize a lot of people don't recognize that. If they find a spot out in Pine Island Sound and they step ashore and there's high ground, they think, oh, look, high land. But often, unless they've experienced archaeology or been to the Pineland Center, or maybe are a geologist, they don't recognize that these higher elevation areas across our region are most typically the result of activities by people piling up materials, leftover meals, leftover tools, and over centuries and centuries of time in most cases. They're piled up into what we call middens, M-I-D-D-E-N. Sometimes they're known as Midden Mounds. And this is a photograph of part of what we refer to there on Calusa Island as the North Beach Midden, because a portion of that 60-acre island is comprised of this extensive midden area. This particular midden is dominated by the most predominant shell shown in the midden, you can kind of even see there, is oysters. It's oyster shells left over again from ancient meals of people who paddled and fished this estuary literally thousands of years ago. I'll tell you more about that time frame in just a moment. But archaeologists from the Florida Museum, the Randell Research Center, and other institutions actually began in the 1980s, following up work by even earlier archaeological scientists in the area. And they surveyed and explored much of Pine Island Sound and the archaeological sites, including Calusa Island. And they, in fact, did some formal excavations on some of those sites, including on Jocelyn Island, on Usepa Island, and at Pineland. And the work at that time, it documented that the ecosystem that we know today as an estuary there at Pine Island Sound, you know, with the lush seagrass beds and the mangroves that nurture the fish and the shellfish, that estuary was established first by at least 3,500 years ago. Prior to that, environmental conditions were quite different. But that estuary was there and functioning, and actually people were in the area, fishing and using black mangrove, red mangrove, buttonwood, sea grape plus pine trees for their firewood. They were making and using nets. They were gathering oysters. They were gathering other shellfish too, using lightning whelks and other gastropods to make tools after they had eaten animals. And there actually was pottery use as well. Some aspects of their cultures were quite unique. And nonetheless, people have been in these estuaries for quite a long period of time, these archaeological excavations showed. So 3,500 years ago, well, I'm sorry, 3,500 BC, and there are various ways we construct time frames. I'm going to use BC because that's so familiar to most people, but if we think 3000 BC, it actually falls into a very broad time period that's known as the Archaic. It follows, the Archaic follows what was known as the Paleo-Indian time. It extends much further back than where this list starts on your screen that I show you here today. And it's well before, the Archaic time is well before the time that the people that we refer to as the Calusa actually settle on Pine Island's shores and begin to accumulate large Midden Mounds and excavate canals and become a very influential and powerful culture of people in Southwest Florida. But in order to study gradations in environmental change and in human cultural change and how those intertwine, archaeologists ascribe names to various era. So there's a whole range of talks that could be done just about the Archaic periods. And so the key takeaway that I wanted to make with this slide are simply really these two things. And one was that this is an era of people prior to the people we know as the Calusa, that people have been in this estuary for a long period of time, and that there have been environmental changes, including climatic changes and global changes that influence the local environment back through all these periods of time. During these excavations, which there have been very few because there actually are very few of these sites of people from what we're going to refer to tonight as this late Archaic period. These were typical shell tool types. Whelk is referring specifically to lightning whelks. And on the left-hand side of the screen is what would be referred to as, or what is referred to as, a cutting edge tool. You can see the angle on the end of the columella indicating it was used more for chipping than for hammering. But there's an evolution that shows through time in this tool type, where in later time, it is determined how to make holes through that shell in order to insert a handle. So the earliest versions of these tools by people in the estuary using lightning whelks did not have that pattern of a hole and a handle. Nonetheless, quite effective tool. And some of these tools persist through time and stay very similar. And so the dipper up there at the top, those remain in the culture long, and people continue to use that type of tool long into the future after the Archaic. The adze blade there on the left becomes refined as well, but stays really similar. And then these columella is the middle of the shell used into just expedient tools taken and hammered and poked, become less frequent later through time as well. And also there was pottery in this era as well, fiber tempered pottery. And so people were making use of the environment and the environmental conditions of the area. Well, enter Calusa Island now. And what we find is that on Calusa Island is the archaeological site that does date back to that time period. It's a late archaic midden. It has components that do stretch into what's known as the Calusa-Hatchie period, that 1 to 500 time period there. And it has a really fascinating modern history as well. But there's a concern and an interest about Calusa Island in particular here for us that I'm going to share now. And that is that Ed Chapin, who's been living out there on the island, had noted and had made known that the site was really eroding and eroding rapidly. And he noted that since 1973 until the early 2000s, that there was a loss of over 36 feet of the midden and of the shoreline along the 260 feet long shoreline. So 36 feet out lost along that 260 feet long. So that in itself was alarming, but this is a comparison, this map here, of a 2016 aerial photograph with one that was taken in 1944. And what it illustrates is that between those years, 1944 and 2016, apparently 90 feet of midden, of evidence of those people of the past, of the environments of the past, of their legacy and their lives, has eroded away. And that erosion has been due to climate change impacts that include rising sea levels and increased frequency and intensity of storm events. Now, this regionally felt, locally felt loss is, by the way, a manifestation of what's going on in the planetary systems, of course, with global sea level rise shown and documented here from NASA, the same organization of scientists whose really good planetary and precise data measurements can get us to Mars and beyond. So this is their information on their website that you can go to yourself. And of course, sea level rise is caused by two factors related to global warming. The added water from melting ice sheets and glaciers, and the expansion of that water as it warms, since warmer water takes up more space. This particular graph is from coastal ground data stations from 1870 to 2013. This one, also on their website, is from satellite data and clearly shows the pattern. I was just talking with a friend of mine 2 weeks ago. He's a local commercial fisherman here on Pine Island, old timer commercial fisherman, and he has kept meticulous data and records on high tide, on tides, tidal patterns. And he himself has noted in his data how the high tides are now approaching what used to be referred to as king tides, that our high tide regions have really increased that dramatically, that it shows in his data as well. So we know that this is happening. We understand this loss at the island. We had wanted, Randell Research Center and archaeologists, for a long period of time to get out there and try to capture information. But it's a really intensive undertaking to do this kind of scientific work correctly and precisely. But in 2014, some investigative work did start. Dr. Karen Walker worked with a geologist from Florida Gulf Coast University on a project where they studied oysters through time, and they got some samples and a radiocarbon date of 785 to, there's a range, these dates, 785 to 745 BC on that oyster shell having been left there by people. And they also validated that oysters of that time were quite a bit larger than recent oysters are. And then in 2016, this is Jennifer Haney sitting on the bucket. She was with Pennsylvania State University, and she did work at the island studying charred wood and fuel wood from the region, which gives us information about the environment to the forest nearby, environmental conditions, etc. So those two projects added information to the chronology because Jennifer also got radiocarbon dates 800 BC to 540 BC for charred wood used by people for fuel wood on the island. And there still was, though, recognition that we could use more information, really needed more information as the Midden was eroding away. So in 2000 and, what year did we start this? I should put the date. You see the arrow over here? And this was started in 2016 is when it was. So the Florida Public Archaeology Network came on board with us at the Randell Research Center. And you see that arrow above a PVC sleeve over a bit of rebar. These were placed 30 meters apart across and along the shoreline in order to establish a point at which data could be taken to measure erosion off of the Midden. And if your little viewer from Zoom is in the way on the right-hand side of your screen, you can move it around until you can find that little blue arrow or big blue arrow, and you can get a view in this particular image of the stretching of that Midden. And next, the volunteers and staff were trained on how to take precise measurements from those rebar to the edge of the Midden in order to keep information and data about any changes to that Midden edge. And again, the Florida Public Archaeology Network was instrumental in coming on board with us to establish these protocols to get folks trained and give us validated ways to collect the information. So as artifacts are tumbling from the Midden's edge, they're carefully documented. All the data is uploaded into databases. And under this protocol, there have now been 26 different visits by our trained folks. And during the course of the years, we've been noting the impacts, including one of the most impactful events was Hurricane Irma. This shows the same area before and after Irma. If you can locate in the image on the left where it says Calusa Land Trust and this gumbo limbo tree, on the right, there's the gumbo limbo tree toppled. Every one of those little pin flags was an artifact. That is a tool, something manufactured or made by people, which at one time had been sealed, really carefully preserved there by the environment, and then now potentially would have been lost to the rising seas and because of that storm. Some sediment from various places along the island have been redeposited and moved down the island, building some protection in front of some areas of the Midden. However, we also have serious undercutting going on where the edge, which we didn't have at all when this project started, where the edge of the Midden has undercut, so scooped out areas of the Midden underneath, and in some places it's up to 1 feet in now, and we expect pretty soon that the top of those sections are going to come tumbling off. So with all this reckoning, it was also then resulted in a formalized archaeological excavation and more project beginning in February. Resources were brought to bear. Calusa Land Trust got involved and gave us permission. Florida Public Archaeology Network, trained volunteers, including our very own Helen Fox, were involved as well. It was under leadership of Dr. Michelle Lefebvre, who's pictured there with one of our volunteers, Kevin Lawler. So archaeologists are contributing to the data and information about past climate conditions and their impacts on people. And that can be done and is done by looking horizontally across a site, by examining the extent of where middens are, where people were, and were sea levels higher or lower, and how did people respond and move around. And so the first aspect of the archaeological work that was done here was to do shovel test surveys. So shovel pits are dug across mapped and carefully placed transects. And a shovel test pit is like a hole with a lot of rules because a shovel test pit is standardized too. It's 20 inches by 20 inches and it goes less than 3 feet deep. It can give a lot of information doing a series of these with minimal impact. All the soils are examined, all the material is placed on those shaker screens that you see in the slide on the left, and all the artifacts are recovered and then later cleaned and analyzed and processed. In addition to the shovel test pit work that was done, an excavation unit was opened, and that goes vertically. So the shovel test pits are giving us information horizontally across an area, then vertically, the excavation that was a pit that was about 3 feet by 6 feet. And in that case, materials are carefully scraped, everything 10 centimeters at a time. That's like 4 inches at a time, where everything is taken off. It's screened, it's examined for artifacts. Artifacts are carefully taken care of. And at the same time too, back on the beach, a process of what's known as profiling takes place, where the midden is examined for all the vertical layers. And in the case of Calusa Island, the profile, which we were examining there, revealed that the deposition of the material over time wasn't a simple layering. That there are some other complex factors at play, interactions with the environment, and remains to be studied a bit more to help us understand what that all means. After all the field work had been completed, and these photos were taken pre-COVID, so this actually was in March back here at our lab. And you notice on this screen where it says 1/16 of an inch, and that is because that's how fine mesh this screen is. The materials are being washed through that screen, and the reason for this small is to recover the tiniest of fish bones and the tiniest of mollusks, all of which are environmental indicators and will tell us a lot about the paleoclimate of the time once the analysis is complete. Now, like many projects with COVID precautions being taken starting in March, we've put a lot of this work, most of the work, on hiatus. So we've done some small scale cleaning up of material, making sure it's safe and sound from any storms that we might have. And we look forward to moving forward with some plans to get some of the material analyzed. But I'm really happy that I can get the word out to a local organization about this important project and about the precious material that you might find as you embark on a kayak or boat trip and find yourself on a place like Calusa Island. And then that I'm able to remind you too that if you do visit a site like this, to please, as they say, just leave only footprints and take only memories. Unless you take some really good photographs and you'd like to share those with us for our presentations. Now, also, if you would like to find out more and to get involved, the Florida Public Archaeology Network is going to be hosting virtual training sessions for their Heritage Monitoring Scout program. And the Heritage Monitoring Scout program is gathering data and information about cultural and historic sites all across Pine Island and across Florida, in addition to on Pine Island. So Florida Public Archaeology Network Heritage Monitoring Scouts. And of course, you can check the website, come walk the Calusa Heritage Trail, stay in touch with me as well. Now I know that you have a busy agenda of other items. I just want to be sure I think important folks who helped make this work possible, the Calusa Land Trust, Florida Public Archaeology Network, our own Florida Museum, which we're a part of, and the folks who helped by providing these lovely images. So with that, I will stop my share, and then I think there might be just a few minutes for some questions.
Thank you, Cindy. Beautiful, beautiful pictures and a really good overview of all this work that's and all these thousands of years of people living in the environment that we call home right now. So if there are any questions, let's see how to do that. Either what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to stop your spotlight, and then I'll be able to view everybody. There we go. So if anybody has a question, just raise your hand or wants to say anything.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just realizing I saw Gabrielle, one of our wonderful volunteers. I want to say hi.
Oh, hi, Gabriel.
Like that's Jamie. Jamie, who had a question.
Yeah, sorry. It's nothing technical. I was just looking at your website and it said that your facilities were open, but that your gift shops and tours and whatnot were going to be closed. Is that still the case? Are you guys open to the public to walk around and whatnot?
Yes, the trail is open sun up till sundown. So please do come and walk. It was beautiful over there this evening when I took a walk before the talk. That we are really close to opening the visitor center with the restrooms and gift shop to the public with additional COVID protocols. We had some things to put in place to feel comfortable for our staff and volunteers making that happen. But we're looking forward to being on site more routinely and having those facilities open soon. But for now, yep, sun up till sundown. Please do come take a walk.
Well, you guys do an excellent job. Before COVID, I would bring the kids up there and they just absolutely loved walking around. And for parents, just having them outdoors and experiencing that is priceless. So thank you for your continued hard work.
Oh, thank you for saying that. And you're very welcome.
Sherry, you have your hand up. Would you unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question?
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say thank you so much for A, bringing this presentation, and B, giving this presentation. I learned an awful lot and you've really piqued my interest, and I look forward to the future with learning more. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. That's it's a great part of my job to be able to do that. And I appreciate you all at the Civic Association as well, doing really great work for Pine Island, keeping us informed and staying involved with keeping our island great.
Yeah.
So I would will not be joining you for the rest of the meeting, unfortunately, tonight. So I'll just sign off and say farewell. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. And we should probably make it a regular gig where I come and tell you things are going on over here, because there's often lots going on that is unknown. So
thanks again for coming, Cindy, and we'd love to have you back anytime.
All right, you're welcome, Nadine. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, our next presenter is Kari McPherson. He's looking for a variance for his house at 3702 Snowbird Lane in order to build a swimming pool. He needs to reduce the setback requirements, and this is a public hearing that he's required to do by the county. I appreciate him for letting us host him for this. And go ahead and Kari and let us know what's up.
Hi, Scott. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep. We can.
Well, I just muted. There we go. I just unmuted myself. My name is Kari McPherson, as Scott said. And first, let me thank you, the Greater Pine Island Civic Association, for putting me on your agenda and hosting this meeting. I really appreciate it. Scott is correct in that my wife and I are applying for a variance setback from the rear of the property to install a swimming pool. The current setback is 20 feet, and we're asking for 9 feet. Currently, the 20 feet is actually the back wall of the existing home, which of course leaves no room for anything from that back, which is the reason for the request. I have a picture, I have a site drawing of, if I could share my screen. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can. Go right ahead.
I'm going to try that. Okay, that's, if you can see that.
Not yet.
You can't see that. Okay. Apparently, I don't know how to do that. Share screen.
There's a button on the bottom right after you hit the share screen.
Share.
There you go.
Now you can see my screen.
Well, yep. Now we need to see the document that you'd like to share. Yeah.
Well, it's giving me problems here. Anyway, I know that while I'm trying to figure this out, I guess, I noticed that a couple of my neighbors that actually have a budding property on the north side of my house, which is bordered by Pine Tree Drive. I'm on 3702 Snowbird Lane. The back of my property borders Pine Tree Drive. Yeah, I don't know what I'm showing here, but I'm going to unshare my screen if
Yeah.
I don't know. Share.
If you
There we
pull,
go.
Kari, if you pull up your document before you share your screen and just have it sitting there, then when you share your screen, we ought to be able to see it.
I will try that. But the neighbor directly to my west, Izzy Hendricks, they had a pool. They applied for the same variance, although their variance was 5 feet back in 2008 when they built their house new. Like I say, they're a budding property directly to my east. I don't know why I'm not getting it here.
Kari, does that mean that their property is 5 feet from the road?
Their pool is 5.
Yeah.
There's approximately 15 feet from the road, Pine Tree Drive, which is of course a private road, about 15 feet from the road to the property line, which would be in my backyard and Izzy's backyard. So there's probably 20 feet between the road and her pool. It would be about 25 feet between the road and my pool. And I noticed that Denny Decker and Jane and Gary Wolf, they are the budding properties directly to my north, directly behind me. Jane and Gary Wolf, they're in this meeting. And I appreciate them. I appreciate their support. So I'm going to try.
Okay, good.
I have, and part of what I wanted to show was I have letters of no objection from them, and not from Denny. I didn't ask for them. I had to get one for the county from Jane and Gary, and from Izzy to my west. And I own the property to my east. I just purchased that property just this past spring. Hopefully it will minimize the amount of traffic that travels down Pine Tree for the installation of my pool. They can access from Snowbird Lane and then from that open lot to my east, which we own now. So that'll minimize any wear and tear on the road and minimize the traffic for the construction part of the pool. So I
So
sure would like to.
You're gonna try to pull that up again?
I am, but I don't know how I'm going to be able to do it. Let me try this. I'm going to close this. And I hope we're still on.
I can see you.
You can see me? Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
you gotta hit share screen. That green square at the, says share screen on it.
Okay. Now I have my site plan is up or coming up right now. There it is. Now I have to ask you again if I can share my screen. Is that right?
No, you can share at any time.
Now are we seeing it?
Now, yeah, we're getting there. Now we need the document. There we go. All right.
Okay, I sideways. To the on the left is Pine Tree Drive, the road of Pine Tree Drive. Okay. On the right of this screen is Snowbird Lane. That's the front of my house. You can see on the left from the border, from the back border property to the back of my house is 20 feet. Izzy and Lonnie, when they put in their pool, they needed less of a setback, less of a setback because of the design of their pool. My pool has this L or cove, if you will, where the lanai is, that the pool will set into, and of course, the enclosure will attach to my lanai. So I don't need the setback to be down to 5 feet. 9 feet is plenty for the size pool I'm requesting. So I'm going to close that. Anybody have any questions about that? No?
If the
close that.
If the pool is 25 feet long, why did you put it that direction as opposed to parallel with your side lot line? Because that would be about a 20-foot setback.
I wanted the pool to follow parallel with the lanai, Sherry. You know, the length of the pool to follow parallel with the line. The dotted line that you see next to the pool is actually my overhang for the lanai. Okay, so that's covered roof, you know, where the lanai is, and then it's about 4 feet before the pool would start from the edge of the lanai. No, Sam. So it's a little bit of a misnomer that where that dotted line is actually covered roof. So I couldn't turn the pool that direction.
Yeah. Okay, are there
I still maintain that.
any other questions about this? The only thing I keep thinking about is a story that one of my neighbors tells about when her husband was alive, and perhaps not thinking too clearly, he drove the car with the two of them in it directly into the swimming pool, and the car sank down into the swimming pool. And it made me think of that because it is your proposed pool is quite close to the road. Not that I imagine that such an accident would happen again, but it made me think of that.
Well, you know, that's a reasonable thought, with the exception with the 9 foot setback. from the actual paved road, my pool is about 24 feet. And at that location, there'll be a retaining wall of about 20 inches because of the elevation. So there is a retaining wall there. So you hit the wall before you end up in my pool
Yeah, okay. All right.
with any luck.
Sounds good.
Karen, I just have,
And of course,
Sorry.
yes,
Did you say both neighbors on either side have pools that sought a variance and received it?
no, just to my west, I own the property to my east,
Yeah, okay.
and that's a vacant lot. The people to my north, which are Lenovo, Gary and Jane Wolf, they have a pool, but of course that's in their backyard. Their front yard looks at my backyard.
And what's the reason for the 20-foot setback?
You know why it was originally 20 feet? I have no idea. Easement maybe for the private road. I don't have any idea.
so Carrie, this is Scott. You have both the neighbors who the county required you to get an okay from. You have letters from them saying it's all right with them?
I do, and
Okay.
I could
Well, that's
bring
okay.
those up.
And you're gonna have a
It might be
fence around, I assume you're gonna have a fence around this thing, right?
Oh yeah, it'll be an enclosure, a screened enclosure. Like I say, it'll have a retaining wall on the north side and partially on the east and west sides because of the elevation, and it'll be completely enclosed.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any more questions?
Yeah, Scott, this is Jeff again. I question about, variances. We're going to be talking about that with the Doppler tower, and how do we prevent ourselves from opening up Pandora's box when we, support variances? Obviously, a neighbor's already achieved that. They had a variance for their pools even closer to the road, as Carrie's pointed out. But I'm mentally doing gymnastics here of an emotional appeal to say build the pool, and one that says, well, the variance or the setbacks there for a reason, and what are we doing if we say we're going to grant an exception?
Well, you're right. I mean, there are purists that believe that there should be no exceptions to a land use plan. I mean, that's a legitimate position to take. The fact of the matter is there are exceptions, and the county's going to give them out. We don't have the final say.
Yeah.
There'll be a hearing on this, I'm sure, and that'd be the time to do that. Personally, I'd like to know, does anybody have any strong objections to this?
I do on principle.
Claudia? Can you unmute Claudia? No, okay. All right, well, anything more?
Can I say something?
Sure.
As a neighbor across the street and just one lot down from the west, I'm directly across the street from the property that Kari was talking about, Lonnie and Izzy, that had built the pool. And I got to tell you, it's kind of an attraction. It's not a deficit to us at all. Manatee Bay here is a deeded property association. And on Pine Tree, all of the houses do own that extra 15 feet on the other side of the street. So it's really not as if the pool that Kari's discussing is really that close to the road. It's not. You've got 15 feet plus the 9 feet that he's talking about.
Claudia, can you unmute? Claudia, can you unmute yourself? Claudia, you got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, she's trying. She's trying to unmute.
Well, while you're waiting, this is Sherry. I'm having some battery and power issues, so you may lose me. I'll keep trying to get back in if you lose me.
Okay. Claudia, look in the lower left corner of your screen. There should be a microphone there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm pretty much with Jeff. I think it was Jeff that was, you know, right now the neighbors all are fine with it. But what happens when the neighbors move on and other people move into their property? I think that those are there. We ran into this problem with the heliport. You know, people had signed and said it was okay, but they put in specifications, and 15 years later, because they had signed those things be okay, we have a heliport. I'm just thinking that those things are there for a reason, and the neighbors net right now might think it's fine, but down the line, the neighbors might not think so. That's all I got to say.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I've got one real quick. You know, on the last comments was if I move into an area or I want to purchase in an area and I see someone has been given the setback and I don't agree with it, then why should I buy in that area? I'll go someplace else. You know, to me, I don't see a problem with what he's asking for.
Okay.
One could also argue then that shouldn't have been the house that was built or purchased if you wanted a pool. I mean, it goes both ways.
Okay, is there any way we can vote? Usually it's, you know, it doesn't mean anything, but usually we vote on these kind of things. When it's in person, we just raise our hands. It's a little difficult with Zoom, so I'm not sure how to do that, just to give a feel of how
Well, if you stop sharing,
you feel about it.
yeah, Scott, if you stop,
Here's some results from the web.
if we get the screen sharing taken off. So if Kari, would you stop sharing? There you go. And then you can use the reaction. Well, no, don't do that. Just if you want to do a raised hand, you can go ahead, Scott, because now we can see just about everybody, I think.
Okay, can you see everybody? There's 16 of them, 4 by 4.
Yeah.
Okay, all in.
There are 2 people who will not be able, unless they share their video.
Maybe
Diane,
they could just unmute and weigh in after we take a show of hands.
Yeah, let's do that.
Linda Cudney, you just.
I'd like to throw a couple words in if I could.
Video on.
Yes.
My name's Gary Wolf. I'm the neighbor directly to the north. With what you're saying there, it's I can't see how it would ever affect anybody that moves into our neighborhood, because they've already got that extra land on the other side there for whatever they want to do with, plus this other 9-foot easement. So it's far from infringing on anybody that I can see.
Linda Cudney, could I ask you to take your screen share off? For some reason, you're sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry. How's that?
Much better. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well,
technical.
Scott, can I say something?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Roger.
If the neighbors, adjacent neighbors, do not have any objection in the past, we've always approved something like this. A variance is a variance for the circumstances at hand. These original lots were laid out 60 years ago or something like that. They didn't consider pools or whatever. I don't think it affects a future somebody considering moving in the neighborhood. As one, if it's there, it'd be like you're moving in next to a swamp or something. You know, it's there, and so I would have no objection to this.
Yeah, I don't think this is the kind of thing that could be a precedent for some developer who wants to come in and say, you know, we want these setbacks for all plats, so this new development. I think this is something that's, you know, historic and you know, maybe the lot shouldn't have been so small, but in the future, I don't think they're ever going to be this small again. I live on an 80 by 100-foot lot, and it's pretty hard to live your life on something that small. Okay, just show of hands. How many people that are here have no problem with this? Can you count, Ellen?
Okay, keep your hand raised if you have
don't think
no
it's so-
problem with it. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Doesn't-
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And how about Linda?
I don't
Linda,
think,
problem or no?
uh,
Oh,
no problem. You have a problem with it? No, neither of us have a
okay.
problem.
So that's 13 who say no problem.
And opposed?
1.
Sorry, Kari.
Well, you got an ulterior motive. You're worried about a Doppler radar tower. That's,
I have a principle. I got another issue.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I
That's good.
understand. All right.
That's
All right,
good.
thanks, Kari. You got a recording of this you can use to come up with a list of names of people that were at the hearing. And good luck to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for hosting this. I really appreciate
Okay.
it.
Good luck, Kari.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. I got a very brief presentation here on the water quality issues at Tropical Point Beach. Since the last time we met, we've done one test. As you probably, well, let me just go through the what's going on at Tropical Point Beach. The water keepers started testing the water out there. And since then, we've had 10 tests of how safe the water is. What they test is enterococci, which is a fecal indicator bacteria. If you got poop in the water, there's going to be a lot of this enterococci. And 70 is the cutoff. And if there's more than 70 in the count per 100 milliliters of water, you got a problem, you shouldn't swim in it. Okay, the first test Lee County did, which was because of public pressure from the water keepers, they came up with 10. Then we did a public records request because we found out from Betsy Clayton that they'd done another test which had discouraged the school board from allowing kids to go on field trips there. They never released this to the public. It was done on October 30th, 2019. It's 687 MPN per 100 milliliters. That's almost 10 times more than what is safe swimming. And if the water keepers had made a stink, those kids would have been in that water. But what the county did was they told the school board, they didn't tell anybody else. So the public didn't know about this until actually right now. And we started testing in conjunction with the Calusa water keepers. And we have these certified lab tests. We've done 5 of them so far. The first one was on June 9th. That was 41. That's pretty good. Next one, July 8th, 31. We're thinking, well, maybe we don't have a problem because we didn't know about the 687 at that point. Then on August 28th, we did another test, and that came back as 243, about 3.5 times the safe level. On October 6th, we did another test, came back as 1,660 MPN per 100 milliliters of water. So what's that divided by 70, 20? And then we did another test on October 13th, and that came back as 75. We've been giving these numbers to the county, and they've sat on them. And they refuse to do any testing unless the school board asks them to for a field trip. And I've repeatedly asked them in writing to test out there. The Calusa water keepers, John Cassani has done the same thing. And so far they've refused unless the school board asks them to do a test before they send a busload of kids out there to get submerged in the water. So we're going to just keep on. We're going to meet the board of directors of the GPICA is going to meet next week. My thinking is we should go to the county and ask them if we can, on our own expense, the GPICA, put up a bulletin board and put the certified water tests, post them on Tropical Point Beach so the public knows what they're getting into out there. It's the best we can do. I mean, these water tests cost $65 a piece. For me to go do a water test is 70 miles round trip. Plus I got to get in that water. I got waders, but I don't always wear them. So that's my thinking. Any questions on that? Okay, don't swim at Tropical Point Beach.
Would it be possible for us to have a little square in the Pine Island Eagle stating what the current fecal count is?
Well, we could, Sherry, but I'm the only one that's doing these tests. One of the rangers from the Coosa Waterkeepers was going to do a water test tomorrow, and she's quarantined, so it's going to be me again.
It's also not going to be accurate for very long.
Pardon?
Well, I just think the Eagle is the best way to get the word to the most people on the island. And by the way, just before I lose you because of I can't get a charge, I am vehemently opposed to the Wink Tower. So if you lose me, I'm voting against the tower.
Okay, I'm not sure we're going to vote on that. We pretty much.
Okay.
But.
Can I say something?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So this is Gabrielle.
Hi,
and it's really fun to see you guys.
Yeah.
But I've been following John Cassani and the Waterkeepers, and I get emails from them, and apparently the source of the E. coli and the pollution is Fort Myers, and they are not admitting that it's their problem, and they're not facing it, and because what they have to do is monumental. They have to restore all the septic systems and everything that's causing all this. I mean, one of the creeks, I forget the name of the creek, is highly polluted, and it runs right into the Caloosahatchee, right down to us. Yeah. So that is the source, actually. And if we want to do something about it, we have to. Fort Myers has to own up to it, first of all.
Well, I don't think Fort Myers is causing the fluctuations we see here in the water tests, because we're anywhere from 12 to 1,660. This seems to be more of a localized issue. There's something adjacent nearby Tropical Point Beach which goes up and down. Now I don't know if it's a septic system that's failing or numerous septic systems that are failing, but that would be wonderful if the county would go out there and find out what the source of this fecal pollution is. Well, that's too much to ask. I'd just like to have them test every 2 weeks so that people don't swim in poop.
Well, I used to own a house on Tropical Point Drive, and I loved that little point down there. And when I sold my house, I had to get the septic checked out thoroughly and everything, and mine was tip-top shape. Thank goodness. So yeah. I'm not part of that contribution, or I wasn't anyway. I guess. I don't know.
Okay, well, you're out of these things.
I'm out of I'm out of trouble.
I had a conversation with Roger Wood about this. I don't know if Roger wanted to chime in or not on this.
Oh yeah, I saw him.
You still here, Roger?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, they're down at the end of the block there. That area gets near. Their elevations are near the water, so at high tide, the water is up in the drainage ditches for the streets there, and all those older houses that were built back in the 50s, their septic fields are underwater, and so somehow or other that's got to contribute. There's houses all along the waterfront there that you wouldn't be able to do that nowadays. So some of those areas are possibly suspect. However, it comes back to, this is an issue not only in that neighborhood, it's island wide on Pine Island, and it's also countywide for homes in Fort Myers and up in the neighborhoods in the North Cape that they haven't put in the sewers yet, although there are not too many old ancient houses there. But the state and possibly the county needs to come up with a septic field inspection ordinance that upon the sale of a house, it should be mandatory that everybody's septic system would be inspected, and if found
Isn't it?
lacking, would be brought up to code. And probably every 5 years, even if somebody doesn't sell their house, it's normal in most areas to have every 5 years your septic system has to be inspected.
Sounds like a plan to me, Roger.
Scott and I were talking, this is an issue for the county and possibly the whole state. And it's hard to cherry pick and say, well, there's this one polluter, this one bad apple out there, when it essentially, going up the Caloosahatchee River, all along there, I don't know if you've ever taken a boat ride up there, there's cattle wading into the river and doing their business there. There's old homes all along the river. So there's stuff from here to Lake Okeechobee that's contributing to the water pollution. It's bigger than our area. So that's all I got to say.
And like I said, the goal is just to get the county to test the water out there and let the people know when it's not safe. And that's not too much to us. They test 13 beaches in Lee County.
Right.
And they don't test this beach because it's not a designated beach. Well, it has a sign that says no lifeguard on duty, which indicates that it's okay to swim there. Just, if you start drowning, you're not going to get any help. Well, that's not the issue, really. That water is very shallow.
I would like to know, when is it safe to go in there?
I honestly, Claudia, I wouldn't go in there ever unless I was doing a water test.
Just put a sign up, assume that it's polluted or assume it's not safe for swimming. Stop.
We don't have the authority to do that.
Well, you could ask them. You could
We'll
ask
them.
Yeah.
We'll even pay for the sign. How's that? Right?
In answer to Claudia's question, probably in the dry season, it's going to be a lot better. When we don't have these high water levels, when we have these flood stage situations or high king tide situations, that's when it's going to be bad.
Okay. Any more questions on that? All right, let's move on to it's getting late. Let's move on to the Doppler radar tower. Jeff, you want to do an intro on this a little bit? You've been studying this probably even more than I have. And you still with us, Jeff?
Okay, everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared to do a presentation, Scott, but let me just make a couple introductory comments, and I think we need to figure out what the Greater Pine Island Civic Association wants to do going forward. But the Lee plan identifies Pine Island as wanting to preserve the unique character and culture of the island. The plan is concerned about vehicular access and, importantly, egress in the case of an emergency like a hurricane. They want to try and preserve the environment and the sensitivity of the coastal environment. And they want to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of the island residents, which is a big issue with the argument for the Doppler tower because of the supposed increased weather forecasting capabilities. And then the plan wants to support the agricultural and small business communities in Pine Island. Well, there's an apparent gap in coverage with Doppler radar and the greater technology with both horizontal and vertical capabilities, the vertical allowing ground cover coverage between Tampa and Miami and Key West. And so Southwest Florida has somewhat of a gap. where some of the accuracy is being challenged by Wink in terms of wanting to build a tower. They've gone through a whole application process, but there's basically two parts to it. One is a variance seeking objective, which has two subcomponents. One is the height restriction on, I'll say, buildings, towers, etc. on Pine Island, limited without getting into all the details of sea level and site plans, basically 45 feet. The proposed Doppler tower is 110 feet, so it's far in excess of the height limitation. Secondly, the current code calls for monopoles, meaning a solid pole supporting wireless communication structures, and the size of the Doppler tower requires in standard design as a lattice tower, 4 legs and lattice work up to the tower. So those are the two variances that are being sought. And then there's something that's called an exception, and that's for wireless communication that's greater than 90 feet. And I think that's a federal law, or certainly a Lee County restriction. And at 110 feet, Wink would obviously exceed that. So they had one application process for those variances and exception. They got feedback from the county planners. They've responded to that feedback. And the main updates that they had is more focus on the safety benefits and explanation of how the safety benefits will help islanders and Southwest Florida in various emergencies, rain forecasting, flooding, etc. They also attach more information about safety benefits specific to Pine Island because of the exposure they perceive that our island has. They addressed an issue which the county was or the planners were concerned about, is how does the data reach others? And what they responded with is the data would go from the tower to the meteorologist at Wink. They would translate and disseminate the information to the public and emergency management agencies. They would enable the National Weather Service with that same information. There's no comment about the timing of that information as to when it would be released, but it's obviously managed by them. And they said you have access to our website, which I looked at and is basically a radar map right now. I am personally, very concerned about, and I wrote a letter to the editor in the Eagle, and I don't want to regurgitate that whole thing, but I'm very concerned about the health issues surrounding the radar with 1 million watts of power, operating 365, 24/7 for 360 degrees with a range of 125 miles. I find it analogous to a lot of the arguments for 5G and the Bio-Initiative report in 2007, updated in 2012, indicating all kinds of biological issues. Current standards are more thermal issues in terms of heat on skin. I think it's totally inconsistent with the commercial development allowances in the Lee plan, which is more small business, bait shops, restaurants, things like that. I felt bad for Kari in terms of variance enforcement. I have kind of a principle that I'm arguing here, that there's a reason for that height restriction, and we shouldn't be seeking a variance. And I find it ironic that Wink is settling on Pine Island as the best site for the Wink Doppler tower, because no one has developed beyond the 45-foot height limitation. So they have a good view of all weather, and they anticipate no one else will seek a variance that would block their view. And I find that rather ironic that they take that position. There's other sites that they had in their information that has various blockage issues. In my layman's opinion, they don't look very severe, but they would argue that they are. I think there's a weather war that goes on between Wink and NBC2, and who's calling hurricane turns first. And I think that they're trying to create a business advantage with having the tower here. And one of the things the county planners are concerned about is any variance should benefit the whole general public, not just the owners of the property. And Wink would argue, well, we are with the, the better forecasting of weather. And then the whole environmental impact. They did include an environmental survey in the latest submission, which indicated there were no issues with any endangered species or other wildlife on the site. Now, I would argue I'm not just concerned about the site, I'm concerned about the 125 miles that beam goes, 365 days a year. So I've just spent the afternoon trying to digest the response. There's another individual on the island, Deborah Swisher Hicks, who's been quite involved in this, has a Facebook site set up, and I've been having some discussions with her, and I will contact her tomorrow to get her reaction to all the changes. So I think maybe, Scott, it'd be good, like you said, possibly a task force group, be formed and, address this and come back to the Greater Pine Island Civic Association. We have the whole hearing process, which hasn't started yet, but eventually the staff will make a recommendation. Then it goes to a hearing examiner. The hearing examiner opines on the variances without the commissioner input in terms of any approval of the Board of Commissioners. And then if one or the other party is not satisfied with the outcome, then they can appeal to the Board of Commissioners. And I'm sure it'll be appealed irrespective of what the decision is by the hearing commissioner. So I don't have all the details in front of me. Like I said, I wasn't prepared to do a presentation, and I apologize.
Sorry about that, Jeff.
Talking through this from some notes. But I am adamantly opposed to this, and I didn't even do an introduction, and I apologize for that. My wife Lisa and I are new to the island. We just moved down here a little over a year ago, end of August, from Wisconsin. We rented a place here for 2 months, thoroughly loved the low-key, laid-back, rural nature of the island, and want to see it maintained, in addition to significant concerns about the health issues. So I see you're looking probably at a clock, so I'm going to be quiet now.
I promised my wife I'd be done by 8. I just wanted to add a couple things. Jeff, by the way, that was a great presentation for, especially off the cuff.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and we'll be in touch. Yeah, I would like to put a task force together to stop this. Once they punch a hole in the height restriction, which is really the crown jewel of the Pine Island land use plan,
right?
And then it opens the floodgates. It's the camel's nose in the tent.
Exactly.
Besides the thing being an eyesore and possibly a health hazard. Two things that you left out. The Wink News, as you said, is in a ratings war with NBC, who starts off almost all of their 6 o'clock shows saying the only Doppler radar in the area. NBC has Doppler radar in Fort Myers, which, by the way, adequately covers Pine Island. We're not really gaining anything by this. We're already covered by NBC2's Doppler.
Well, interestingly, on the news with Tropical Storm Eta, Wink had a banner that said Doppler radar when they were showing radar.
Where'd they get that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's a ratings war, Jeff. You know that. The other thing they did in their recent follow-up filing with the county is they said there was some issues about eagle nests.
Yeah.
And they said there weren't any eagle's nests anymore.
Yeah.
And interestingly, they said the only 2 trees that had eagle's nests in the proximity were blown over by Hurricane Irma.
Right.
Very conveniently. So we're gonna have to get some updates on that.
Those were eagles.
Excuse me, did you get the map of all the eagles' nests on Pine Island?
Yes, I saw that.
Okay.
And
I think it's kind of dated though, isn't it, Jeff?
It was, and I can't remember if it was 2016 or maybe it was.
Yeah, that was pre-Irma.
I think it was earlier than that because they still had the 2 nests on the property.
Yeah, it was
The issue
pre-Irma.
is the 2 nests that were on the parcel, the 78 acres or whatever the size of the parcel is, or 200 acres, whatever. The surveyor that was doing the environmental assessment on migratory birds could not find them, figures the trees went over. But my concern is with a 125-mile range, I don't know how it's going to impact all the migratory birds and wildlife all over the island, not just the 2 nests on the property. So,
Can
Can I make a suggestion?
Go ahead. Anybody else?
Yes,
some-
with your task force, would you get Kevin Ruane involved?
Yeah,
Kevin,
the
you know,
commissioner,
our new commissioner, get him involved in it too?
we can try.
Well, my understanding is on variances and special exceptions, the county commissioners don't even want to hear it. You can't make a meeting with them to
That's
go
the
over
old
variance.
ones. Kevin is a new one, and I
No,
think he's
but I
got
mean, it's a rule. The commissioners have this freaking rule that you can't lobby them on variances. Go figure.
We can follow up on that.
Hi, could I say something? Hi there, I'm Catherine Greenleaf. My husband and I just bought property on Western Drive, which is literally right across the street from this proposed area. This agricultural parcel, I think it's so with 172 acres, something like that. But anyway, I read the 272 page application from beginning to end, and it does talk about how this tower is going to be emitting a high-pitched screech sound 24/7. I just would like to know from somebody, how loud, how many decibels are we talking? And, am I going to be able to sleep at night living across the street because of the sound?
The sound the decibels were identified in one of the spec sheets on the tower. If you go back through that 272 pages, there is a spec sheet. I think it may have been the FCC license that indicates the decibels. And my honest reaction is I didn't think it was that high, but I'm not a sound expert. It seemed minimal. It was how they position it, but that may be positioned for a specific reason, that it's louder than they want to admit. But if you check that out, or if you want to, shoot me an email. Scott has my contact, or give me a call. I could find that document to help you.
Tell us your email right now.
Or amplify it. What?
You can tell us your email right now.
My email's jmwaller333@gmail.com. My cell phone's 262-639-1234.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else want to?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions here on this. I live in Eagle Lake Estates. I'll be one of the people that will actually be seeing the tower when it's built, which I don't have a problem with it, because I see the cell tower behind the fire station also, which I'm not sure how tall that is. I'm assuming they had to get a variance to put the cell tower up.
There's a specific in the code for personal communication cell towers, that can be an exception.
Okay. The other issue, you're talking about the 125-mile radius and the problem that you have with that. Well, if Channel 20 has one in Fort Myers, we're already within that 125-mile radius.
Yep.
Is that causing any issues on the island right now?
Could be.
I mean, if it is, then I would be against the new tower. If it's not, I don't have an issue personally. And I'm, like I say, I'm right next to the field that it's going into.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, stay tuned. And we were talking earlier before the meeting started that it's really important that the people that are opposed to this show up at the public hearing that will be held with a hearings officer, and then follow up at the county commissioners meeting. It's not sufficient to just designate somebody to do it. The county commissioners count heads. They count heads.
Right.
And I remember I was at a recent meeting and commissioners meeting, and I wanted them to put a non-binding referendum on the ballot for November, and I was the only one there because we were afraid of COVID. And literally 30 people showed up to lobby for having backyard chickens allowed, literally. And they got the commissioner's attention, and they're probably going to allow backyard chickens. So it's important that we all show up for these things.
Well, Scott, given the late time, why don't you and I take this offline and kind of strategize about next steps of whether it's.
Can I get to you tomorrow on that, Jeff?
Sorry?
Can we do that tomorrow?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, just give me a call.
Got my number, just call me.
Sure, okay.
All right. All
Okay,
right. Well,
thank you for
that
listening.
being it, thank you, everybody, and thanks for showing up. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Without objection, adjourn. Thanks, everybody.